I thought today, I actually planned for this thing today, which is very rare, just so you understand. I was told I was talking about transportation of illegal moonshine and avoiding taxation on illegal moonshine. I expected a bunch of rednecks from West Virginia and Kentucky in here wearing Pib overalls. So you guys look like banker types and M&A types and stuff like that. Am I in the right place? Okay. I don't know what they look like, but you know what I'm saying. Can I sit for a minute? Kind of pull up a chair, like our true story thing said. It's been an interesting journey. It really has. And the film that you saw is kind of where we are now. So I'm going to go back a little bit, and we'll talk about how we got where we are today. And hopefully it'll make some sense. I will tell you right away, a couple things. Number one, the fact that I've sat here this long is a small miracle. I will be roaming, so please excuse that. I'm also the poster child for ADD. Does anybody else suffer from that? Raise your hand, please. Probably a bunch of you. So I will tell you, we'll go down a million rabbit holes, but as a general rule, for the most part, unless I really screw it up, it kind of comes back together in some shape, form, or fashion. And thank you, Natalie, and for the kind words. I gave her 10 pages of things to say about me. She only said a couple. So we'll get back to that. Look, I grew up in this business. And my father started a company called Brown-Forman in 1964. And the name Brown-Forman may not ring a bell to a lot of folks, but Brown-Forman owns Jack Daniels and some other stuff, and we'll get to that. So that was Dad's only, actually it was his second job. His first job out of college, Dad was a chemist. He didn't plan on being a chemist, he wanted to be a doctor. And then he got into organic chemistry, and that kicked his ass, so he decided, hey, I'm going to go into chemistry instead of becoming a doctor. So his first job was actually in Kentucky, working at the lab that analyzed horse urine for the track. Not real glamorous, but that was his first job. So he only held two major jobs in his entire life. So I grew up going to work with my father at Brown-Forman on weekends. You can imagine a 5 or 6 year old going to a multi-million-dollar research and development lab, messing with all the equipment over the weekend. But I was always a science geek. So I really the bug was early for me. But to me, it really wasn't about bourbon back then. Bourbon's kind of big now, right? It's kind of turned into a big deal. To me, it was the science. It was being able to walk into that lab and play around with stuff and enjoy the sights and sounds and aroma. So Dad was there for, like I said, almost 40 years. And I was never a corporate guy, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But at Brown-Forman, Dad created Woodford Reserve, Gentleman Jack, Jack Daniel's Single Barrel, a bunch of other brands, not just whiskeys, but tequilas and vodkas and rums and things like that. Dad had something to do with. So he had a great career. But Brown-Forman's I'm sure any of y'all know what Brown-Forman is. It's a great company, never really strong on innovation. Their stock prices are always phenomenal. If you're into making money and having a stock that does real well, Brown-Forman's the company for you. But if you're looking for crazy innovation, it never really was that kind of company, although it is now. It has become that way now. So like I said, 40 years there. Dad had an amazing career. They're an inaugural member of the Bourbon Hall of Fame, and just an amazing treasure. Is Linda around here anywhere? Linda, did you know Dad? Did you ever meet Dad? Okay. So Linda's from Kentucky here, very well known in bourbon circles, but just an amazing human being. And the wonderful thing about my father is Dad was, and we'll talk about it when we get to Angel's Envy, Dad's like I was with my kids. He just threw me in the deep end of the pool when I decided to get into the industry, but he sat there as a quiet presence, trying to help and mentor me. So at Brown-Forman, Dad created Woodford Reserve. Anybody heard of Woodford? Not a pretty big brand, right? And a great brand. That was toward the end of my father's career. And Woodford Reserve was really one of the first, let's say, handcrafted bourbons that was out there. I hate words like handcrafted, small batch, because it means different things to different people. I get asked all the time, well, what is small batch? And my answer to that is not a number, it's a mentality. It's a mentality. It's how you feel about how you make that product, the love you put behind it, the innovation that goes behind it. That's how I look at small batch. But Woodford was really the one that started it off. I was working at Brown-Forman at the time. I took a job at Brown-Forman. My first job at Brown-Forman, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a sinus issues right now. My first job at Brown-Forman was in the mailroom. Anybody done that route before? Come on, somebody, certainly. At Brown-Forman, that's the place where a lot of the executives' kids went to work. That's the place that, you just get your foot in the door. And I would tell you this, I probably learned more about that company working in the mailroom than I ever did working there as not the mail guy. You're in the belly of the beast. You see everything. I was driving the CEO of the company to the airport and all these different places, and I was hearing the conversations in the back, and they were talking to me. So it was a really good exposure. But once again, I learned a ton working in the mailroom at that company. Started working in marketing there. And I loved it. I love the spirits industry. One of the things that I found difficult, though, and I'm sure you all work with family businesses, so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. My dad cast a long shadow. And one of the things I had an issue with, and now I think it's crazy because I should have ridden that horse all the way home, right? Lincoln Henderson's son, I'm like, hell yeah. Nepo baby, let's do this shit, let's do it, okay? But I wasn't real comfortable with that. And the other thing I wasn't comfortable with was I was not a Fortune 500 kind of guy. I don't do meetings. My team knows I have the attention span of a 7-year-old. I'm good for maybe 20 minutes. Then I get up and I wander. I'll get a drink. I'll go to the bathroom. And I just can't do it. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I do think a lot of things need to change there. There's nothing worse than being in a meeting for 2 hours and nobody decides anything, or you're in a company where everybody's scared to make a decision. Anybody know companies like that? Right. So I never saw the opportunity where I'd be able to step into a situation where I could be creative, where I could be expressive, and literally feel comfortable enough. And I think that's the essence of having a great business, where you can be in a meeting and feel comfortable saying the stupidest frickin' thing you can, and that the people in the room, you trust them enough where you can say that. Because what? Some of those crazy ass ideas end up being good ideas, right? But if you're not comfortable with the people you're with, you're not going to say it. And that's an environment I foster in all my businesses. You really have to do that. So I left the industry. In the meantime, I went to school, learned how to fly airplanes, did some other stuff like that. I enjoyed that, but I never saw that really as a career. Got into some small businesses. At 24, I think, and this is how stupid we were, by the way. At 24, I created a book that I had in Walmart. I became a dealer for Walmart, which is a huge opportunity, wouldn't you agree? But at 24, we were in the bar at noon. We had our Motorola brick phones. Anybody remember those? And we just sit in the bar and talk shit, and we had this wonderful opportunity to do some really crazy things, really great things with Walmart, but we were just too young to understand it, which is okay because it taught me a lot. It was a big accomplishment, but we threw that away. So fortunately got a little bit better at that. Created some other companies, ran some businesses, sold some companies, small businesses. We're talking family businesses. We're talking businesses of revenue of $500,000, nothing really huge, but still not bad. Some very creative things. Did that for a number of years. Then I ended up with 6 kids. Don't ask me how it happened. I say, and my wife's not here today, they say, how does it happen? I say, Julie has no self-control. That's what I say. She was here, it might be a little different story. And you'll hear more about that here in a minute. So 6 kids kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. I say there was a plan. She says there was. Neither way, it ended up happening. So we moved down to Florida. Raising our kids in Florida, it's a hell of a lot nicer weather than it is in Kentucky right now. And I started itching. By the way, Dad had retired from Brown-Forman. And I started getting the itch to maybe get back into the spirits industry or do something with Dad. So I started thinking the wheels were turning. Started off by doing some consulting for some other brands. There's a brand called Clyde Mays Whiskey out there now that I was the CEO of that company, consulted and built that. They've got a new distillery that's coming up now. And so finally it came to me. So I flew down up to Kentucky from Florida, and where my father was living in Kentucky still. And I'll never forget this. It was a Saturday or Sunday morning. We were sitting in the basement, finished basement, that type of deal. And I said, Dad, I want to start a bourbon brand as a family. What do you think? Dad did what dads do, even if their son has a crazy-ass idea, and it was. Excuse me. He said, sure. That was it. Sure. Let's do it. Now, we had no clue how we were going to get there. We really didn't have the money to the huge amount of money it would take to make it happen. Excuse me. But from that point on, we said, we're going to give it a shot. So, that was the easy part. Now I had to go back to Florida and tell my wife, ask my wife. Julie's about 5 foot tall, 98 pounds soaking wet, and she owns 3 Burn Boot Camp fitness centers. Anybody heard of Burn Boot Camp before? Ladies, anybody? This workout would kill me, and 80% of you men in this room, it would kill you too. I promise you that. So I go back to Florida and I say, Julie, I'd really like to do this. And she's been used to my entrepreneurial nonsense over the years. She knows what it's like for us to be living paycheck to paycheck, putting everything we have into something that was crazy by many standards, but might just be crazy enough to work. So I came to Julie and I said, hey, let's do this. And Julie, just like my dad, she said, okay. Julie moves up to Kentucky. I have to sell the house in Florida. She takes 6 kids, 4 dogs, 2 birds, a fish, and a bearded dragon. And by the way, that's the working title of my book. What do you think? Moves them back to Kentucky to start school while I sell the house. Lived in an extended stay hotel. One of the maintenance guys in the hotel taught one of my kids how to tie his tie for school. That's sacrifice. We moved our entire family and 6 kids and a life that we had, a life we had in church, a life we had with friends, in athletics. I was a coach, all these things as well. Up to Kentucky for an idea. That's all it was at the time. It's really insane, right? You guys work with family businesses a lot? I would assume. It's kind of a silly question for me to ask because I'm sure you do. So we move up to Kentucky. I start this little bourbon brand called Angel's Envy. Anybody ever heard of Angel's Envy? 1 or 2. Anybody been there before? On the tour? Good. Angel's Envy is it's a bourbon brand. It has now been described as the most successful bourbon startup in the last half a century or more. It really heralded and ushered in the new era in bourbon. Now, bourbon's always been hot, but in the late 60s, early 70s, bourbon was getting its ass kicked by another spirit. What do you think that might have been? What? Vodka. Late 60s, early 70s, vodka came along and just started demolishing bourbon. So the bourbon industry took a big dip. But Woodford Reserve was really the beginning of that resurgence Guys, I'll say this a million times anytime I talk to groups about business, and timing is everything. It's everything in your business, right? It's that eternal decision of knowing when to pull the trigger, right? And a lot of times, the brands that are really successful, there's a blind aspect to that. If it was that simple and somebody came to you and said, this is the right time to pull the trigger, your business is going to be perfect if you do it right now, the conditions couldn't be any better, everybody would be successful like that, right? You have to recognize when that time was. And I'm not going to say we really recognize, I'm not going to say we woke up this morning and we're that smart. We said, okay, now we can create an iconic brand right this minute. And because this moment in history is the right time, it's going to work. Because it's not that simple. I will tell you this. If I knew ahead of time, let's say you had to put something on, let's say you had to put every step you take to create a brand on a whiteboard. We had to write down everything to make the brand happen. That whiteboard will go around this room probably 2 or 3 times. If I would have seen that ahead of time, I'd have been scared to death. So I think that we didn't know in a lot of ways what we didn't know, which was very beneficial. Made it a little harder when we started True Story because, we really know what's going on. So this ain't easy as we thought it was. But it's that blind, let's jump in, let's do it, let's make it happen. So we started True Story. The beginning of the bourbon craze, we created an iconic bottle. I mentioned iconic with True Story. You saw the True Story bottle. There's nothing like that. We broke the mold with the Angel's Envy bottle. Some of y'all know this. It's got the wings on the back. It's got a nice little shape like this. I probably should have put a bottle up on the screen. It was nothing like any other bourbon bottle out there, which made me a little nervous. And I tell people, the reasons I was scared about it were the same reasons I loved it, because it was so unique. One thing I've really learned over the years in my travels and businesses is that very often when I'm looking at something or trying to create something, the point where I get uncomfortable tells me in many cases I'm on the right track. That's the essence of creating something that's unique, something that's unusual. You saw the True Story bottle, that white and black. You'll see it tonight. We're going to have a little reception. I'll let you guys try it. You can't miss that, can you? You really can't. And it was a bold move. And to this day, I've always second guessed myself. But man, I was uncomfortable. This is what we're going to do. So we had a nice little run with Angel's Envy. Angel's Envy's become a global brand. I think right now it's worth a couple, maybe $2.5 billion, somewhere in those lines. It's truly a life force in what's happened in bourbon whiskey. It almost seems like it's not real in many aspects, because we only started in 2000. I didn't even mention the date. I started in my basement in 2009. It has not been that long. So we had a bunch of spirits companies come knocking at the door, as you can imagine. You get to a certain case threshold, we've got a number that the big guys think, okay, we can scale this. My philosophy has always been, for an acquisition, don't even talk to anybody until you are at the point to where you cannot take that business any further yourself. And that may mean you need money from them. That may mean you need distribution. That mean, back office, whatever. Why not? I mean, why do that until you're absolutely necessary to do it? So Bacardi came knocking along with a bunch of other companies, and we had some really close connections with Bacardi. Bacardi is a family company. I think they're the largest or second largest family-owned spirits company in the world. Great people. Facundo Bacardi is the chairman of the board. There's Bacardis everywhere. There's a million of them, which is good and bad, by the way. It's great you got so many of them out there. It ain't so great because there's an enormous amount of dysfunction that comes with a company like that has so many family members, and everybody's got a freaking opinion about everything. Hence my meeting thing. Nothing gets done. It's very, very bipolar, the whole situation. So Bacardi came knocking. I went to a luncheon after we sold the company, and it was a group of distillers. It was ADI, Linda. A group of amateur distillers, let's call them. People that wanted to build brands. People that their dream was to have a distillery. And I was at lunch right after the acquisition. And some guy said to me, "Aren't you the guy that sold out to Bacardi?" "I'm sold out?" I'm like, "No, I sold." In all fairness, there were a lot of zeros in that check. But the funny thing about it is everybody at that event, I did what they all want to do. That's what they wanted. And I never quite understood it, but I think you guys get it. So Bacardi came knocking. We really didn't need a lot of what they had to offer. Now, we wanted to build this we had no debt. We wanted to build this new distillery, which would have cost us probably about $80 million. We would have had to take on debt to get that. So we thought, okay, this might be a good solution for us to partner with them. I wasn't ready. Some of our investment partners, and this is where you got to, as you're working with these companies, you got to think about this. Some of my investment partners said, "Look, you heard the phrase, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered," right? They're like, "Man, this business is blowing up. The industry is great. You know, what happens tomorrow if it's not like that?" We got a lot on the line here. We only raised, I think, $16 million throughout that whole process. I started the company with $400,000 to buy our first liquid, to do everything we did to bring the brand to market. So we really had to listen, and this is a fine line, by the way, between listening to your investment partners who sometimes don't know the right answer. They know about their money, they know they'd like to make some money, they'd like to get some of their money back, but they don't necessarily know what the best time is to do that. But we listen to our investment partners, which, by the way, I think you should do. As a good business partner, you listen to your partners. You listen to the people that wrote those big checks to start off. So we sold the company to Bacardi. It was it took 6 months. Any lawyers in here? Just a couple? Can I talk shit about lawyers for a minute? I'm just kidding. For somebody like me who had never come from an acquisition like that, it was a very interesting exercise. But the lawyers, man, I mean, and really, as much as I bitch about how much we paid them, we didn't have any problems after, so it was probably money well spent, right? So you lawyer up. What was the big guys in Miami? I can't think of them. I don't know. Anyway, so we sold to Bacardi. I can't talk about the price, but it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which wasn't bad for a bunch of hillbillies from Kentucky. We had an earn-out. They asked me to stay for the earn-out. And the brand is really tied to my family. To this day, it is. You walk in the door there, my face is on the wall. My father's face is on the wall when they hear the family story, which is kind of an interesting thing because now that we start another brand, I think we kind of nip at their heels a little bit, But they're smart enough to realize that the heritage is the heritage. So my job going forward, number one, was to make sure we got our earn-out. And hopefully get it sooner rather than later because the more money we got, right? The quicker we grew it, the more money we got. So I stayed. The other reason I stayed is for the integration. So they spent all this money on a brand, a family brand that is tied very closely to the family name. Brands I say this about celebrity brands all the time. I get every freaking celebrity on the planet comes to me and wants to do something. I think if you live by celebrity, you can die by celebrity, right? Something goes sideways, So the family aspect of Angel's Envy was so tight that it was very important. For a long time, nobody even knew Bacardi bought Angel's Envy. And the reason for that is that we fiercely guarded that family identity. And from an M&A standpoint, that was most of my job, was to keep the mothership, that's the nice way I describe it when I talk about it, to keep the mothership there to use them when you need them, for support, for guidance as well. Look, Bacardi's been around 150 years. They know something about spirits, right? But at the same point in time, closely, religiously, fervently guard the brand identity. And that's what I told Facundo Bacardi when stuff would get weird. I'm like, Facundo, my job is to protect what you paid so much money for. Because there are going to be so many people in your company that are going to try to figure out a way to screw it up. Because they want to do something their way. They want to come in and make their mark. They want to do this. The biggest fight I ever had there was over a bat. A bat. Does anybody know about the Bacardi? You ever seen the Bacardi symbol, the Bacardi bat? There's a whole story about the bat in a cave in Puerto Rico and Cuba, all this stuff. But everything has the Bacardi bat. You may not even notice it. You might even realize that, but look at a Bacardi bottle next time. You'll see the Bacardi bat on the bottle. So I had a bunch of safety guys come into my plant in Louisville, our beautiful distillery, by the way. Angel's Envy Distillery. There's nothing about Bacardi there. We don't want people to think that. We want people to think of our family of bourbon. Bourbon is family. We have 3 generations. There are bourbon companies that have 8 generations of family members in the bourbon industry. So the safety people come. We've got these signs all around the plant. You know, safety signs, don't do anything stupid, don't get yourself killed, you know what I'm saying, stuff like that, right? You know, don't do this, don't step on this, don't step over this line, don't trip. Mostly common sense stuff. But they put that frickin' bat on that sign. I lost my shit over that. And I will tell you why. My entire existence there, well, not entire existence, was spent preserving the identity of Kentucky bourbon, the identity of the Henderson family, all these things that Facundo, as I told you, paid a ton of money for, and you guys want to come in and put up a bat. So I had to fight this thing all the way up. And the people I first talked to, well, this is what we do. There's nothing we do about it. We do this all the time, blah, 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 blah. So finally, I had to take that all the way to the... And the funny thing about it is I got higher up in the company and told them what they were trying to do, really to Facundo. He said, I get it. Don't put the bat up. I understand. But nobody in between understood. Everybody's mission was to get that bat on the wall and not think about how important it was to preserve. You get that myopic vision. It was a great integration, by the way. There should be a study written on this. I've been blessed to be able to talk at Harvard Business School. We haven't talked about this specifically, about the integration of this brand into the Bacardi family. For the most part, they were smart enough to realize, look, there are certain things you have to do when you get bought by a big company. There are regulatory issues, there are just big business stuff that we weren't really good at that you really need to do. I understand that. But there were so many things that could get in the way of you being the business that they paid for. So I worked really hard every day to make sure that we preserve that. So I strongly encourage you, when you're dealing with these family businesses, especially if they're purchased by larger businesses, the critical component of that success of that ongoing business is to preserve that and keep those guardrails up and make sure everybody knows that. So I retired for a couple years. You saw it in the video. And I didn't plan on doing anything. For a number of years before, when I worked at Angel's Envy, I was a firefighter, which I enjoyed. And then I realized I'm too old and fat to be crawling around and burning buildings anymore. So I transitioned over to law enforcement. Oddly enough, I'm a death investigator. That's all I do. And I still do that, by the way. I think it's really important to keep that connection. So in my county, if you get shot, stabbed, blowed up, run over, homicide, suicide, whatever, I'm there. I'm your guy. I hope to never see you there, but you probably won't know it if I'm there, and that's you. It's soul-sucking in many ways, as you can imagine, but it's truly one of the biggest blessings that I have the ability to do, and the blessing to be able to do is walk in, and it's not unlike business. I'm solving puzzles. I walk in someplace, I know nothing about what's going on. I'm sure there's businesses you guys may be associated with, or you have to figure out, you're walking in the door, by the time you leave, you got to figure everything out. I really enjoy that aspect of my business. So I retired for a couple years. You saw the video on True Story. My kids came to me, Dad, let's do this as brand as a family. Just like my father said, just like Julie said, I said, okay, let's do it. And now we have True Story. The brand is in 18 states. Just for numbers, because I'm sure you guys are all about numbers. We did a $30 million raise. We raised 23, and then hit the frickin' wall in January of last year, which you guys know that, right? Everybody's kind of, the money went on the sidelines, but it's starting to open back up now. We're still working on the raise, which is really crazy because with the track record we have, it's been fairly easy to raise money when people are wanting to invest. The end goal is to sell the brand. I have a 5-year plan. I don't know whether it's going to work or not, but I think the boys feel the same as well. This, to me, was about building legacy for them. It's doing quite well. I can't complain. So next steps, I'm not quite sure. I'm out in the field. I'm going to L.A. when I leave here. Kissing, handshaking babies. That's what bourbon's all about. Making connections. Liquid to lips. It's not a hard business. I drink with people all day. However, I have a pretty healthy attitude about that. I really don't drink a lot. There are a lot of people in our business that drink too much. So I don't know what the next chapter is like for us, other than it's a lot harder than it was before. A lot more competition. You have to stand out. You have to be unique. You have to check those boxes to be one of those brands that are successful. There's a ton of them out there. There's a bunch of crap on the shelves. If you got any bourbon connoisseurs here, you know what I'm talking about. What makes you stand out? This is it, and I'll wrap up with this. You have to check the boxes. In our case, great story, great packaging, great liquid, and great pricing. If you can check those boxes, you can get above the noise because there's so much noise out there. And then hopefully transcend, and this is what I talk about this a lot. I do a lot of stuff with Dave Ramsey, and I talk about this a lot. Transcending the transactional. Transcending the transactional. It's making that connection with your consumer on a very personal basis with your brand story. All those things come together. You breach that, you pass that, and then it's not a consumer product anymore. When I come and do a bourbon dinner, we're buddies. You're not just buying something off a shelf. You're buying something that you know the story behind. You have a connection with that brand. It is not a commodity. It's not just a simple transaction. It's doing business. And you guys do this all the time. You know what this is all about. People like to do business with people they like. And people they can relate to. And people that take the time to understand what their needs are. Not just bring them whatever the fuck you want to bring them that day. I should have warned you ahead of time. My language sometimes. I can't, Sorry. That's the essence of brands. That's the essence of bourbon. And that's what we're going to do with True Story. You guys have been very attentive. I know, I post-lunch food coma thing. I know you got a busy day. I would love to take, and if y'all have any questions just for about 5 minutes, I would love to answer them. Anything's on the table, please feel free. Yes, sir.
How did you negotiate the non-compete that I'm expecting to have in place? Or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I did something I strongly encourage you don't let your clients do. I didn't sign a non-compete. That was my deal. And it worked out for me. But remember, I stayed there for several years after the acquisition and after the earn-out. So when I left, I was like, guys, I'm tired for a while. And they knew when I retired, Facundo said, Wes, when you do start something else, please come and talk to us because we'd be interested in maybe doing something with you. And we're about to have that conversation too. But from a practical standpoint, have that non-compete, obviously. But also remember, in a founder situation where you've got the founder of the brand and the brand is the identity, and I've seen it happen a bunch of times with other brands where these companies come in and they think they know better than that founder. The founder's the one that's made that connection with the consumer. Now, in time, you can probably overcome that, but you cannot forget that identity that's been forged there. And it's very tight, especially in bourbon, where families are so important. Yes, sir.
What have you learned from working with your kids?
What have I learned working with my kids? Oh, wow. This year's been a little more of a challenge. It's generally not me and the boys, and there's 6 boys. I don't know if I said that or not. 6 sons. It's the boys and each other. You know, they're very competitive. Like me, they were all athletes. It's just that kind of that mindset. So I have to referee and mediate that more than I have to mediate issues between me and them. It's hard. I think my kids have entitlement issues sometimes. My philosophy has always been, because your name's Henderson, you have to work harder than everybody else. But guess what? A lot of people, I hate to say this, in this generation don't understand that. They don't understand that. They expect it to be given to them because of who they are. And that's really hard. And some of that's our fault in parenting, by wanting to give our kids everything we can and wanting them, you're not doing them any favors. So that's been probably the most difficult thing. And the young gets pissed at the other one because the other one's got more opportunities. I'm like, the kid's been in the business 15 years longer than you have. You barely, you have trouble, tying your shoes in the morning. God bless you. So, oh yeah, that's my 22-year-old, by the way. He's still at home. We call him a squatter. To his face. I don't know how. It's not great parenting, probably, but truly, it's been a joy. Family planning. When you're working with people in M&A, we have family meetings. I worked with the Bacardi family at Harvard on succession, and having those things planned out, have all of your documents done. So critical. Even though it's a family, it's still a business. If I get hit by a bus, do I have to investigate my own death if I get hit by a bus? Those are messy, by the way. I'm just telling you, very messy. So does that answer your question? I hope it does. Anybody else? Yes, Natalie.
I'm curious about the rule and sort of the whole amazing experience we're building there for, again, more attention.
Great, thank you. I didn't talk about the castle, and I'll talk about it briefly here. You saw the Kentucky Castle, right? It is a beautiful boutique hotel, spa, farm-to-table restaurant. It is an iconic destination in Kentucky. It's near Lexington. We are integrating that into the brand story. That's going to be a place where we can host. It's not going to be a true story castle. As a matter of fact, I want it to be kind of non-denominational and have other bourbon brands there too. But it's a place where we can bring partners to visit, like liquor store owners, bar owners, partners of the brand, bartenders for training. Use that as a marketing tool for the brand. That's my vision. It's a huge wedding venue right now. Any of y'all seen Vanderpump Rules? Anybody? Don't be embarrassed. Yeah. They had the wedding there. Do you remember that? Is it Jack's? Their wedding was there at the Kentucky Castle. So come and see us. We'd love to have you. It's right outside of Lexington. It is look up the Kentucky Castle when you have a chance here. Okay. Yes, sir.
Did you introduce them to Costco?
To who?
Costco?
To Costco? The company?
And after you sold it?
You mean Costco as in the retailer?
Right.
Yeah, we were part of Costco during the time while I was there. Yeah. What makes you ask that?
I'm guessing they sell a fair amount of it.
Costco's an interesting, and I'll close with this. It's an interesting animal. They move a lot of stuff. The only problem I've ever had with some of your big box stores is they're good partners, but in some ways they're not good partners because they will not hold your price. And it's not a good look. Like we had special releases of Angel's Envy that we had people lined around the block to buy. They camp out for a special release. That was $300. You go to Costco and it was $250. I've sent people to Costco from my team to buy all of it. So my customers don't see that. But if you're a brand that wants to move volume, and they're great people to work with, don't get me wrong. But as far as holding brand value for a super premium brand, it wasn't necessarily good play, but we did it. Thank you for asking that. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Thank you so much. You've been very attentive. I appreciate it. Have fun. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.